And welcome back to IoT Innovation. IoT is all-encompassing. M2M is the most mature subset. Today we talk about why there is so little um, discussion about this demarcation.
This episode of IoT Innovation is sponsored by Anritsu.
Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board. telecomcareers.com.
Welcome back to IoT Innovation. Our guest today is James Brehm, founder of Brehm and Associates, a leading consulting and analyst organization focused on M2M and IoT. So first of all, welcome James, and thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris.
Thank you again. So maybe let's start with why M2M has got its own identity in the IoT world and what you're seeing in this space as to some of the nuances maybe most people wouldn't really recognize.
Sure. So, one of the things that's a differentiator between IoT and machine to machine has customers and revenue right now. And IoT is still a lot of a dream. But truly, M2M is a subsegment of IoT. And if I were to think about it, it's like the older brother, right? And it's handing off the torch to IoT.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your observation about revenue is spot on. I mean, we've talked over the last few weeks about how there's so much hype and so much noise. And frankly, when it comes to devices, so many devices that really are inconsequential long term for people.
Yeah.
M2M is really much more about substance and value and businesses connecting to each other, which ultimately is about revenue decisions being taken by executives, which hopefully makes it a bit more logical, more than emotional.
I always say that there's three reasons that companies deploy IoT: to make money, to save money, or for compliance and to stay out of jail. And IoT is really about business transformation and making money, where M2M has historically been about saving money and being compliant.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. So, I mean, so maybe James, tell us a little bit about the businesses that you're helping and the trends that you're looking at. Because from my perspective, I kind of chuckle at some of the old ground some of these new companies are covering. It feels like it's the 90s again, and all we've done is just update a few PowerPoint slides.
Well, some of the companies that we're helping are the old guard. It's the guys that have been in M2M a long time and are now making their transformation into IoT, moving from cellular and satellite to other connectivity options, being agnostic to how they connect. But also, we're working with the old guard. We're working with healthcare companies that make big, heavy, rugged machines that now want to move themselves into a transformed world or a connected world.
So with those clients, what do you see as the biggest hurdle that they are facing versus the real challenge when you actually start helping them and digging into their market or focus?
The biggest challenge is partner selection. The second largest is business model. Mm-hmm. They all know that they have to do this. They just don't know when. So once they can select the right partners and then also create the right business models, that's when the move happens.
So do you think that they're starting to get staffed with and supported by groups like yours that are helping them think about these problems the right way, or are we still kind of shooting in the dark a little bit in general with some of these larger organizations?
Most of the organizations are shooting in the dark.
Right.
I wish we worked with more companies, but we only work with about 15 companies right now. And if there's a few hundred companies like mine, that's a lot of organizations that are still shooting in the dark.
Right.
And, the big SIs that have been a trusted advisor for enterprise for years, they're not here yet. And we're waiting for them. to come in and show us how to tie business process and that software that they've invested in the back office to the business processes and the new connected devices.
So building on that a little bit, I mean, what we're seeing is a constantly shifting platform of operating system, architecture, hardware features, and big data. And if you're talking about the large system integrators, the large consulting firms, that's a lot of moving parts to try and keep their hands into. How long do you think it's going to take to do this journey for IoT? And also, another kind of a side question is outside this industry, I constantly end up talking with friends and family about what I'm into and what the work is with IoT. And I really feel like it's not conveyed yet in a consumer digestible manner.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. Consumers don't know what this is. I actually had a congressman in my office a couple days ago, and he's talking about IoT making, I guess, the question between Ethernet and Wi-Fi like a moot point, right? It's bigger than that, but people don't even know what it is. So we have to educate them. But, you know, the SIs and the guys that are doing all the work and the software companies, the big guys, they're not here yet because, as Bill Gates said, we always underestimate or overestimate the length of time it's going to take. So we want it now, and we can see the benefits now. So there's this overhype, but it's going to take a lot longer. The autonomous car, although we had one driving down Las Vegas Boulevard at CES, it's a long ways away because there's hundreds of millions of vehicles that are not autonomous out there, right? So all these things that are connected, it takes a little bit longer or a lot longer, but we have to build these consortiums and ecosystems to make this happen. And that's the biggest challenge right now is ecosystem, as opposed to what I'll call POPO or partnership on paper only. Now, right. I apologize to anybody that speaks Spanish because they know what POPO is really just another word for crap. But that's what most of these partnerships are. They're partnerships on paper only.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, and I think the reason it's partnership on paper only is because neither partner actually understands what the journey looks like.
You got it.
You know, and we've been talking a little bit over the last few weeks about how, you know, is some of this going to get driven by regulation? Is this going to be driven by big companies with their own agenda or by agnostic agendas? And I think that's, you know, that's the usual. That's why I talk about going back to the 90s and updating some slides. This feels like early wireless all over again, except this time around, it's not the domain of only wireless companies or wired companies that actually understand this space. It's basically every company trying to get in the middle of this, which is making it even more convoluted than it ever was before.
Yeah, and it's, you said early wireless. How about early PC, right? You know, there are 5 real PC manufacturers. There are 5 wireless companies that mattered.
Right.
Anybody that makes something matters now. So the ecosystem is so big. The refrigerator guy, the automobile manufacturer, the guy that has a vending machine, all those are connected things. Healthcare things, things that we don't think are connected. Anything that's got a brain in it, a microprocessor in it, should be connected. And it should be streaming data and helping us make actionable decisions.
So picking up on your comments about healthcare, I mean, one of the areas that we're going to be covering in the next few weeks is device security and encryption. I think one aspect that I'm seeing as a long tail here in terms of the awareness of companies and therefore regulators to look at IoT is the fact that all of this non-anonymized data is going to be floating around about us And at the moment, that I don't feel like there's the right security protocols in place to give everyone adequate protection. What do you see as far as developing security attitudes and activities in the industry?
I think security is overlooked, but I just think about this. A few weeks ago, I was driving down I-10, and I saw this big, massive pile up, and it was a semi that was hit, and he was hauling paper records, files, folders everywhere. I looked at them, and it looked like healthcare records, and sure enough, they were. Now, we had all the security practices in place, but all those folders are everywhere, and people's information is just floating around in the wide open, and I could take it, and I could do something with it. Well, we're that way now with IoT, and if we put too much of a regulation on it, we're going to stifle innovation. But we do need to take a look at what are best practices. And the best practices today with papered information, not too different. It's just using it electronically, and how do we tie it down?
Well, and I think to your point about a vehicle accident or a pileup, I mean, there's still accidents that take place even with these security activities in place for the paper version. Hackers tracking down our data or logging in and figuring out how to bypass fingerprints on Android right now. I mean, they're just examples of how security gets improved. It gets improved because people have broken it, and they make people aware. The bad guys break it, a la the Target situation, which caused the US to suddenly get credit cards with chips on them after 20 years of talking about it. In the same way that the hackers advising Samsung that they've got security issues causes them to announce they're doing software upgrades every 30 days now. I mean, it's just the industry drives itself. But I agree. I don't think it's a topic that's getting talked about enough. And again, back to my observation about consumers, I really don't think regular people that are not in our industry, in our space, have the first clue how to make sense of all of this technology noise.
You're absolutely right. Congressman Hurd that was in my office talking about security, about IoT, and about not stifling innovation is at Black Hat next week. He's going to Black Hat to talk to hackers, to look at addressing these issues. So I think that Congress will do the right things if they're educated properly.
Yeah, so that's a good point. For the last few years, I've been part of the Congressional Internet Caucus Advisory Committee, which is a group that was set up to try and help Congress be educated about some of these topics. I think there's room for more of that type of activity so that our elected officials, who probably are not sophisticated on these topics in general, have an agnostic way of getting educated quickly enough so they can vote on the right decisions the right way. I'm not sure what mechanisms could be put in place to help do that, but did that come up in your conversation this week?
It hasn't yet, but we're going to talk more about it. But one of the things I was thinking about was that a lot of the problems are caused by regulation not taking into account what the healthcare organization does, how they handle things. So I'm working with a $1 billion blood company. They make equipment and refrigerators for blood and blood bags. And when I talk to them, they know how things need to happen, to secure the information. But I go out to the hospitals, and the nurses and the technicians and the doctors are doing something completely different with the blood. Right? The way they're handling it, the way they're handling the records. And regulations happening without looking at process.
But I think the issue with process is that it's never been looked at end to end, because these are parts of a journey that were never joined up before. And, because of that, the businesses are moving so fast, it's difficult for them to really step back and look at the whole picture and say, okay, why is this information important? where does it start, where does it end, and what is the complete journey?
You're right.
And back to your comment about system integrators, I don't think there's enough large organizations getting the right help to look at that whole journey and figure out what the holes are, which is why there's so many hacking and security violations that are happening at the moment.
So correct. So true.
So coming on from that, talking about intellectual property, I mean, this is an area that we talk about in the US quite a lot regarding protecting innovation, reducing trolls, for example, helping patents be more easily attained and more easy to execute and to prosecute. What do you see about this in terms of young companies? Because I guess my view as an observation is that IP is very important to big companies, but for young companies, it's usually a choice of pay the bills or apply for a patent. And that presents a really difficult, what I've termed the absorption cycle, where innovative companies get bought by big companies, get swallowed up because of their know-how and their potential IP. Meanwhile, innovation stalls.
Well, I agree. And then there's one other issue. In IoT, a lot of the patents that need to happen are process patents.
Right.
Right? It's about changing a process, streamlining. And right now, most of the patents are technology patents, and we can't do process patents very much, right? So there's another problem.
So building on the IP comment, I mean, we've been working with some universities over the last few months as far as their tech transfer activity. And one of the chasms that we are seeing is that tech transfer usually starts with university research that was either for an external corporate or defense industry client that has certain goals in mind and a certain budget. When that technology comes out to the outside and gets commercialized, there's quite often a pretty big gap between what was done in a research setting, if you like, a prototype setting, and what it will take to scale into full production. Again, we're seeing this as a pretty big gap in innovation. And although the IoT is starting to use some of this technology, we're starting to see a lot of this young technology coming out of startups and out of universities that's frankly just way too young to commercialize quickly enough for some of these big companies that are driven by a quarter-by-quarter earnings expectation. So it's almost like there's a communication gap.
You know, I agree with that. And I work out of a tech incubator in San Antonio, and it's funded by the founder and chairman of Rackspace. And we've got, 80, 90 real startups working there. And they're going to open the Open Cloud Academy there. That's a joint Rackspace UTSA initiative. I think some tech can be really built out of incubators, right? When you power 80 to 90 small startups that are really smart with universities, with large corporations, then you get this exponential power to really dream and think big and harness some of the stuff that, like you said, companies are far too small. And I absolutely hate some of the things going on within the incubators where they're just teaching these companies to pitch for venture capital as opposed to run a business successfully or to license and patent and innovate.
Yeah, I think, I've talked to some friends in the corporate venture community that are working on some strategic IP investments. And this seems like quite of a positive way of protecting some of these early ideas so that later on, 4 or 5 years down the road, there are actually issued patents that are worth something as opposed to either poor patents or none at all. And that seems to be the kind of the long tail of this development cycle, is that you either end up with incubators helping develop a technical idea that the technical founders can do that, but then they are helped more actually with the business side of it than they are with actually filling out the goals of the technology in the first place. Because so often you see VCs that come in, first thing they do is replace the technical founders because they don't have the business skills.
Yep. Yeah, it's a big challenge.
Yeah. So one other of the points I wanted to ask you about is, over the last few weeks, we've been talking with some leaders in the smart utility, chipsets and architecture, some application focused companies. But a common theme that we've talked about in IoT has been both regulation that we've discussed, but also the user experience. What do you see out there with the clients that you're working with, and how aware they are that user experience is such a critical component of this interaction on IoT?
Well, all it took was Google's acquisition of Nest to understand that UI and the experience is key, because there's a ton of connected thermostats.
Right.
There's one Nest.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And they know that they got to interoperate, and they know that they got to provide a good UI. But what does that mean? Because it's evolving. So how they get to that experience is probably through some of the other mobile guys, and also the dashboard guys in vehicles that have a good experience today. Mm-hmm. Leverage what's already been done.
Yeah, I think the challenge with a good user experience is the reason you don't notice it is because it is so good.
Yeah.
And that's really subtle. And we've talked to a team in Boston that have been working on user experience for some time. And they say that one of the most difficult challenges with their clients is that when they deliver the most value is when the client sees the least of the user experience, because it already becomes automatic.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it's almost like forgive me, but it's the price of bikinis, right? The less there is, the more it costs.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So maybe James, just to finish up, as we're getting tight on time here, if there are other aspects of IoT that you're seeing out there as you work with clients that you want to highlight that maybe we've not covered, because it's such a broad topic that it's almost like you can cover every aspect of every industry and still not do enough.
Manufacturing. Mm-hmm. When I say manufacturing, I'm talking about the guys that are actually building this stuff. Apple doesn't build the iPhone, right? Foxconn and Jabil and guys like that. Mm-hmm. So when those guys get up to speed, when they embed connectivity, when they work with entire ecosystems, then we're going to be there. I think about the processes and the ecosystems that need to be made. If I'm an appliance manufacturer, I outsource it to somebody like Jabil. They build it for me, mm-hmm. right? I sell it. It gets shipped. It gets delivered. Where does that connectivity get turned on?
Right.
Probably at the point of departure from the store or the retail outlet is probably the right point, mm-hmm. right? Or when it gets connected at the house. But then the next piece is, when I have a problem with it, I pick up the phone and call somebody, or I go to the website and I ping somebody. It's probably not from the appliance company. It's probably a contact center. See, and we need to tie all these little pieces together to make this ecosystem whole. That's why we're not looking at 2 years or 3 years as a horizon for IoT, but 10 years and 15 years. Because we got to bring those guys in as well.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, I've been asked for a number of years about the comparisons with systems like Felica for mobile payments in Japan, and how that got adopted so relatively quickly compared to mobile payments in the rest of the world. And I mean, somewhat sarcastically, I comment that it was the chairman of the largest bank in Japan playing golf with the largest retailer, and the head of Sony. And it's probably not far off, whereas in the US, Western Europe, other parts of the world, the key leaders of those organizations, firstly, they're on wildly different agendas, and typically they're not three or four people. It's dozens of people, all of which who want to own the space.
Yeah.
So with that, James, I'd like to wrap it up there, and I really want to thank you for joining me today. I'd like to follow up this conversation some more over the next few weeks as we get deeper into some of the M2M aspects of IoT.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
And thanks for jumping in at short notice. I know this was a quick turn, so we'll make sure that we give each other more time for the next discussion.
Great.
So with that, I'd like to thank James Brehm of Brehm and Associates, and close out there. And please let me know if you've got topics or speakers that you would like us to cover in future episodes. Thank you very much.
IoT Innovation is a production of RCR TV. To reach Chris Hare or suggest a show topic for IoT Innovation, you can reach Chris at cbh@ntete.com. To find out more about IoT innovation and all things wireless, visit rcrwireless.com.